Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. So, today we are going to be continuing our discussion. If you've been following us on Facebook or on any of the podcasts, good morning, Lou.
Good morning.
Today we are going to be talking about chapter 3 in the Gita, and we're going to be doing verse 10, 11, 12, and 13. And this is continuing with what Krishna is giving as a sermon to Arjuna, and basically talking about what the quality of actions are. Before we talked about why these actions are necessary, how these should be done with a higher purpose, and so on. And what you're going to find in the next few sessions is going to be quite interesting in what determines you as a person. So let's talk about verse 10. In verse 10, he says, the Creator, having in the beginning created mankind together with yajna, or sacrifice, said, quote, by this shall you propagate. Let this be the milk cow of your desired objects. So this has been taken from the Upanishads, even in the way in which it is said. The part that's said in quotes is in old Sanskrit, because the Upanishads were written thousands of years before the Gita, so the language was different. So the milk cow, or what is known as Kamadhenu, is a mythological creature where you just basically ask for anything from the milk cow, and the cow grants you your desired objects. So the Creator...
The milk cow is a genie?
Sort
like
of,
a genie in the lamp?
So the Creator in the beginning created mankind, and then together with yajna, or sacrifice. We talked about yajna in the last verse, and yajna comes up a lot in the scriptures, both in the Upanishads and the Gita, basically recommending that we work towards a higher cause with our fellow human beings, not just for ourselves. And the Creator is saying, by this shall you propagate, and let this be the milk cow of your desired objects. What he's saying is that through sacrifice, one gains both material prosperity as well as mental peace. Yajna activities, anytime you do something that is a yajna, are endowed with two distinct benefits. The first benefit is that they increase your productivity and prosperity. We all know that, like people who do things for a higher ideal, for a community, for a neighborhood, for the world, for their country, the higher the ideal, the greater the energy that they have to work. I mean, you look at Mahatma Gandhi or Mandela. These people worked feverishly, night and day, without any other thought other than what they're doing for their country. So the first benefit that occurs, that comes out as a distinct benefit from doing yajna, is that you get more productivity and more prosperity. So if you're just looking in terms of what you get out of it, which you shouldn't be, but anybody that says, how much can I donate, how much can I give, anybody who is sacrificing like that, I'm just thinking about the elections right now where Bloomberg says he'll spend up to $1 billion, 1 billion with a B, for anybody that can beat Trump, right? So he's saying, if you can do the right thing for the country, I'll give you the money. So that's basically what happens with a cooperative kind of endeavor. The second thing that happens is when you identify with a higher cause, not just I, me, myself, then the desires for any lower cause drops off. When you think about higher and you're doing for higher, your desires for lower causes fall off. And you see this with both Mandela and Gandhi and anybody else. They are just fixated on what they're doing for their country, and they don't think about themselves. They can be locked up in jail, and it wouldn't even faze them.
Right.
So what is a service? In the verse, it talks about doing service, doing seva. Service means you're giving something without expecting anything in return. So that's verse 10. Verse 11 says, nourish the gods with this, gods with a plural, and may these gods nourish you. nourishing one another, you shall attain the supreme goal. So the British had said when they first came across these Hindu religious scripts, they said this is the babbling. I forget the exact words that they used, but it was like this is the babbling of civilization in its infancy, because they were not referring to this particular phrase. But as I've said many times before, we didn't have books where things were written down at the time. Everything was spoken, and then you just had to have generations pass it down. And so they had to make it short. They couldn't explain it in more greater detail.
Right.
So nourish the gods with this, and may these gods nourish you. And nourishing one another, you shall attain the supreme goal. What does that mean? So ultimately, the whole goal of spirituality is to shift your thoughts away from the world and towards God. So let's follow closely. You want to start thinking, if you tell somebody, don't think about your goal to make more money or to become famous or to work hard, whatever. Shift it towards God. It's not going to work, because you may say, like you said, go to church and then forget about it for the rest of the day.
Right.
The rest of the day, you've got to have that person think about God. How do you get that to happen? So the sages who were very bright said, maybe if the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad, maybe Muhammad should go to the mountain. Similarly, if you can't go to God, your mind can't go to God, except for one time in the morning when you go to church, then maybe God should come to you, right? So how does God come to you? You instill God in whatever it is that you're interested in. So you're interested in making money, so you put a God over there. So when you think of money, you say, okay, this is the God for that. When you think of education, this is the God for that. When you think of rain, you want rain because you're a farmer and you need the rain, you instill a God for that. So that whatever it is that you're interested in, whatever it is that you need, the old sages planted a God for that. Does that mean that Hinduism is from a theological perspective, it is just one God, not multiple gods? And these are just representations, similar to a flag. The United States or India has a flag.
Right.
That's not India, but it's a representation of India. When you salute the flag, you're basically saluting your country. That flag is a representative. So each one of these gods that were made in a specific way with all symbolic, and this sometimes maybe we can talk about it, to what does the symbol, I mean, an elephant god everybody knows that Ganesh in India is an elephant god, large ears,
yes,
trunk, and multiple arms, and a mouse at his feet. And some people actually believe that if you look up in the sky, far enough high in heaven, there is a god with an elephant head. Not true. And this was made for the uneducated people who didn't know much about spirituality, just to give them something to think about. But each one of those things had a symbol.
Sounds like a tool of focus. Just something to get your mind headed in the right direction and get your thoughts and your feelings headed in the right direction.
It's a good segue into the next thing I'm talking about, which is that, so let me finish that thought, and then I'll come to what you just said. That multiple gods. So if you were focused on money, you prayed to goddess Lakshmi. Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth. She's there. You see her with two arms, both facing downwards, and gold coins rolling off her hands. And people that are businessmen who just do jewelry, for instance, or jewelry business, they have a big photograph of Lakshmi there. And the first thing they do as soon as they go into their store in the morning, they open their doors, they look at the photograph of Lakshmi, they join their hands, and they say, Lakshmi, please let this be a good day for me today. What has happened is, as the sage's plan was, this person, as soon as he goes into work, is now thinking of God, goddess Lakshmi. Otherwise, he wouldn't have. He said, I went to church in the morning, I went to temple in the morning, that's it, done. Somebody who's a student thinks about Saraswati. As he opens his books, he has a picture of Saraswati, prays to Saraswati, and says, may this knowledge help me, may I get this knowledge. So there are gods planted everywhere. There's too long of a list for me to give you. But Obviously, Hinduism does not think about all these. As we've talked, there's a Brahman, one Brahman that is everywhere, omnipotent, ever present, present everywhere. These are just symbolic things. So when he says that nourish the gods with this and may those gods nourish you, he, Krishna, or Sage Vyasa, says, if you nourish these activities, the gods of these activities, then those gods will nourish you. So if you're going into your studies by saying, Saraswati, I'm praying to you, I'm devoting all my actions to you, then Saraswati rewards you with great success in your studies. If you're going into this jewelry business and you focus on Lakshmi and you say, I'm going to do the right thing by my customers, because Goddess is watching over me, and I will do the right thing by my customers, make sure that they get the right amount of gold, I'm not cheating them, I'm doing a good thing, making sure they're happy, then Lakshmi says, I will benefit you, I will nourish you. And it's not that there's a real Lakshmi in the skies or that the real Ganesha, but you will be benefited because you're nourishing these gods. So wealth, there's Goddess Lakshmi. Success, there's Ganesh. Knowledge, there's Saraswati. Death, if you're obsessed with death, there's a god for death, Yama. And birth is a god. Farmer wants rain, there's a god called Indra. So nourish the gods and the gods will nourish you. And together, as long as you shift your thoughts away from your selfishness, and you do this, he says, together you will attain the supreme goal, which is self-realization. And this happens, I think, in the Christian. So getting back to your point, your point about form and formless. What did you say?
I was talking about these sound like tools of focus. Like, for example, here in athletics, it's like you pay attention to the team. You do the thing for the team, and you'll benefit because everyone's working towards a higher goal, right?
Right.
Setting up a higher goal.
That's right. So that is the same concept of yajna, that you work together as a team and you work together. Here, in terms of the multiple gods, so as you get further along in your knowledge of Hinduism and spirituality, you realize that there is no God with an elephant head. God is formless. So at some point in the 6th chapter, Arjuna asked Krishna, so should I be praying to a God that has a form, or should I be praying to the formless? Mm-hmm. And recognize that even when you go to church, right, there's a form.
Yes.
Right? There's Jesus on a cross, and you look at that and you pray to Jesus, or there's Mother Mary, and various temples, Hindu temples have various deities. Christ says, I am the Father, the Father in heaven, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Muhammad said the greatest jihad is the conquest of your own self, right? All of these things refer to the same exact thing. But as you get further in your spiritual development, you don't need that form anymore. You can be able to close your eyes without the desires bothering you, and you can think about God in a more formless kind of way.
Is God symbolic of these gods? Are they symbolic of the higher goals, the greater good, that type of thing?
These multiple gods that they have placed, everybody recognizes that they represent the God, which is Brahman. But in this form, they are your way of, like a gateway into that, because you're focused right now on wealth. So you have Goddess Lakshmi. But through Goddess Lakshmi, you're opening up the door to the entire Brahman God. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So then we talked about 11. Now we come to 12 and 13. Now these verses, if you take them by themselves, Lou, you think that this civilization was crazy. It says, verily the gods, nourished by your sacrifice, will give you the desired enjoyments. He who enjoys what is given by them, by the gods, without having offered to them is indeed a thief. Okay?
Yep.
So he's saying, if you sacrifice to these gods, Lakshmi, Ganesh, etc., they will give you the desired enjoyments. But if you take what is given by them without offering to them, you're a thief. That's in verse 12. And verse 13 says, the righteous who eat the remnants of sacrifice are freed from all sin, but those sinners who cook for themselves eat sin. Right?
Yeah.
The ramblings of civilization in its infancy, but it is so deep. So the first sentence of verse 12, verily the gods nourished by sacrifice will give you the desired enjoyments. The first line repeats what is in the previous two verses.
Right.
That if you work towards this God, this goal of yours, and you make your occupation your God, then you'll get rewarded by success.
Right.
The second sentence says, he who enjoys what is given by them without having offered to them is a thief. Now, this refers to the tamasic person. You remember we talked, so the next verse refers to rajasic and sattvic persons. This one refers to tamasic. Now, you remember we talked about tamasic people being lazy, not wanting to do anything, not even thinking about their children or their wives, just thinking about themselves. How can I get something? So such a person does not do anything, just takes.
Yeah.
So in this verse, verse 12, Krishna says he's a thief because he's not doing anything. Prophet Muhammad said, the best of you is he who is best at repaying. So you don't want to take anything for free.
Right.
In the Ramayana, Ram, Sita, and Lakshman were to cross a river. And he was a god. Everybody knew he was a god. He was originally the king to be, and he was about to be coronated, and his stepmother said, you're banished to the forest. And he went there, he had nothing. But everybody knew the story. They knew how good he was as a person. The boatman said, I'd be honored to take you to the other side. When he got to the other side, Ram says, okay, listen, I don't have any money, but I have this ring. I'm going to take my ring off and give it to you. And the boatman says, please don't embarrass me. I can't take anything from you. You are Ram. You're God. You're the king.
Right.
He said, I can't take anything from you for free. I've got to give you something. And so it ended up where he gave him his blessings. But what we need to understand is that whether it's physical help, like taking you across the river, emotional support, body, mind, and intellect. Body is physical help, emotional help, and intellectual help. Whether you take something from somebody else, you've got to give back. You can't take. It's by law of karma, you have to pay it back sometime. So you should pay it back now. So in this case, tamasic people are those from society who take without giving anything back to it. They don't even have a thought of producing, and they're just taking. In the next verse 13, I'm going to take the second line first, which is, but those sinners who cook for themselves eat sin. So here he's now shifted to the analogy of cooking and eating. So he's saying that if a person were a tamasic person, he'd just go in the kitchen and take something that somebody else had cooked and eat it and walk away. A rajasic person is somebody who's passionate, agitated, as 90% of us are in this world today. A rajasic person says he's going to cook, but he's only going to cook for himself.
Right.
But at least he's going to cook. The tamasic person doesn't cook. He just comes, grabs somebody else's theft, and goes away.
Right.
He says,
but his actions are only for him.
Only for him.
Yeah.
The rajasic person, but at least he's taking something that somebody else has worked for. That's the tamasic person. The rajasic person he cooks, but he cooks for himself. And he says he eats sin because he feels guilty that he's only done for himself.
Right.
The sattvic person, on the other hand, cooks, gives to everybody else, and whatever is left over, he eats himself. And in doing so, he gets blessed because he has no mental disturbance, no agitation. He's done his duty, he's done the higher cause, and he therefore becomes more peaceful. Whereas the rajasic person who only cooks for himself, his stomach is filled, but in his mind there's some disturbance that I didn't offer it to anybody else, I didn't give it to anybody else. So there's no yajna in the in the rajasic or the tamasic person. The yajna, the sacrifice, is only in the form of the sattvic person. So one last example that I would give you is that when we went to a restaurant, my wife and myself, we'd often go with 2 or 3 other people. Now, if it happened that there were exactly 4, there's this one particular restaurant that would bring out this appetizer. And we'd have, Indians generally order a lot of appetizers more than the entree. Mm-hmm. Some of these appetizers would come with just 4 pieces in it, right?
Yeah.
So if there's 4 people, no problem. Everybody takes one. What happens if there's 5 people?
Yeah.
Now, I noticed that there were some people that we went out with, as soon as the plate was down, they would reach forward, grab theirs, and eat it.
Yeah.
And there would be, my wife and I would be waiting to make sure that everybody got theirs. And there were other people who would say, hey, how are we going to divide this?
Right.
And talk about it and then share and say, let's cut these up and let's each have a little. But that's the way to run through life. That always think about not just yourself, but others.
Right.
In fact, offer it to others first. And if you don't get any, don't feel bad. You get yours in the end.
Right.
So that now concludes verse number 13 of chapter 3. We're going at a very fast pace.
Yes.
Normally, people do one verse in an hour or multiple hours, and we're doing many more because, as I've said before, what I learned from Gautam Jain, from Swami Parthasarthi, from Swami Vivekananda, Chinmayananda, etc. And some people just don't have the time to sit down and do this and listen for hours and hours and hours, or read for hours about these scriptures. And I'm hoping to put all this down in a short form, so I give it to you. Those of you out of 100 people, if there's one person that says, I want to take this further,
yes,
then at least, I'll feel good about that. So thank you for listening. And Lou, you can do your spiel about whatever they need to do. And I thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.
You found us here on Facebook on the Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist. All of our episodes are available audio only on all your podcast outlets, your favorite ones, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and several others as well. But make sure you like the Facebook page, too, if you're just listening to the audio podcast, so that you can communicate with us, because we want to hear from you, right, Doctor?
Absolutely. I love it when people write, especially if you write questions. I'd be happy to answer them. And I thank you for listening and participating. See you next time.